Okay, so here in my hand, I have a pencil. And of course, pencils are very important to us as students. We use them every day, we need them for school, even if we're not students. We need them. But to us, they're not something that we would consider vital, something that we would consider to have a lot of value or any kind of meaning to them. They're essentially disposable to us because we can go out and buy pencils whenever we want. That's how we feel about it in our hands. But in the hands of somebody else, somebody like the children that I visited on my trip to Belize, a pencil can mean a lot more. I've watched as the kids that we gave such things that were insignificant as pencils and stickers to, I watched their faces light up and I watched them act like they had just received the biggest gift that they had ever received in their entire life. Now, this experience obviously for me was amazing to see how grateful these kids were, and that was awesome. But what isn't awesome is the reason behind that, and the reason behind the fact that they find so much meaning to it while I don't, and that is because basically I have a lot and they have a little. Basically, all of us, not to harp on anybody, but as college students, all of us live relatively privileged lives compared to many of these people in rural countries like Belize, which I visited. So, I'm not here today to say the goal of my speech is not going to be to make anyone feel guilty or feel like they have to do something to help out these people in Belize, but instead my goal is to shed some light on a couple of the problems that people are experiencing in a country that not a lot of people know about. So, before I get into. Oh, sorry. The two problems that I'll mainly be looking at are crime and poverty in Belize. And before I get into these two problems, I think it'd be good to look at a little bit of the general facts of Belize because the country is, as I said earlier, not very well known. So, to provide a little context, Belize is a Central American country that is bordered in the north by Mexico, to the west and south by Guatemala, and to the east by the Caribbean Sea. It's not a big country. It's only about 23,000 square miles, which is just a little bit smaller than Massachusetts to compare it to something that we would know a little better. It's a relatively new country. It gained its independence in 1981 after being a British colony for 125 years. And its population is about 341,000 people. Once again, not huge, but for such a small land, it's kind of packed in tight in some areas and very spread out in others. As for the people of the backgrounds of the population, it's very diverse. 49% of people are mestizos, 25% Creole, and 10% native Mayan. So, its biggest city is Belize City, and that's where we're going to start right now with where I landed in my trip and the first problem that I'll be talking about, which is crime. So I was shown the severity of crime in Belize when me and the group that went traveled to a church called Saint Martin de Porres in the south side part of Belize City, which is considered to be the most dangerous part of Belize. There we met Father Matt Rule and Father Brian Christopher, who owned the school at Saint Martin de Porres, and they told us a lot about how the area had been overrun by gangs, most of them working for cartels from South America that were moving drugs up through Central America. They explained to us that students had parents, relatives, friends, all the time who were murdered or shot at or hurt by these violent gangs. In fact, Father Brian Christopher, one of the two priests that owned the school, just a week before we got there, he had his house broken into and was they suspected because they found a rope that he was going to be tied up and held for ransom. So we got to see just how real it was right off the bat, right when we got to our trip. And just to obviously this is just personal story, and to provide a little bit more of an idea of how bad the crime is, here are some actual concrete stats that show this. According to the 2013 Belize Crime and Safety Report, there were 145 murders in 2012. They haven't come out with the numbers in 2013, so 2012 is the most recent we can do. So 145 murders, which works out to a rate of over 40 homicides per 100,000 people, which makes it the country with the sixth highest murder rate in the entire world. Um, and eight murders per 100,000 is equivalent to an epidemic of violence. So obviously, over 40, as opposed to 8, means that it's a pretty bad epidemic in Belize. So the report goes on to say that the majority of these homicides occurred in Belize City, and the majority of the homicides in Belize City occurred in the South Side. So it's very localized to that area in Belize City. So these 145 murders in 2012 was up 15% from 2011, which unfortunately means that the problem is not getting any better; it's only getting worse. The 145 murders was actually a record for the country. And according to the Organized Crime and Insecurity in Belize report by Julie Lopez in 2010, estimates had it that 90% of drugs from South America go through Belize, which is what fuels these gangs and which fuels them to have turf wars that result in the deaths of not only members of the gang, but their families, their friends, and even innocent bystanders in shootings. So it really is the drugs that mainly fuel these murders in Belize City. And while the murders that are caused by these drugs are the biggest problem, the report also states that there are other aspects of crime in Belize City that are they're very high too, because, considering that thefts and burglaries were the highest crimes on the list. The report goes on to say that, quote, human smuggling and trafficking and money laundering were also major problems in Belize. So it is the hope that of the Belizean government and humanitarian societies that the Belizean government and police force will hopefully be able to lessen this problem that's been growing over the last few years. But as the 2013 Crime and Safety Report states, the police force is, quote, understaffed and poorly equipped, which only furthers these problems of crime. So obviously, crime is a huge problem in Belize. But now let's look at my second of two problems that I'm focusing on today, which is poverty. Which obviously poverty is an even more widespread, not as localized problem across Belize, and actually fuels the crime. So it may be even more of a big problem in Belize. So I saw this poverty firsthand. I saw it in two ways. One in urban poverty, and two in rural poverty. I saw the urban poverty when we visited Belize City at the same time that I saw this crime. I saw buildings torn apart, beggars on the streets, people living on the streets in lean-to shacks, and many of these buildings that were broken down. Half the buildings seemed to be abandoned that I saw. But while this poverty was shocking, to say the least, the poverty that I saw in the rural villages when we traveled to the southern end of Belize in the Toledo district was probably even more shocking. This is where we gave the pencils and the stickers and the hand-me-down clothes and books and the things that I thought of as just normal hand-me-down things that I didn't really place any significance on until I saw how important they were to the children in the Toledo district that we visited in these minor villages. So once again, as I did with the crime a second ago, there is my personal story for what I've seen in poverty, but obviously I need to provide some concrete facts so you guys can get a better idea of what I saw when I was there. So, According to the 2009 Belize Poverty Assessment, it showed that 41% of the population was in poverty, and 16% of this 41% was indigent, which means that they basically do not have the income to have a healthy diet, let alone spend money on non-food items such as running water or anything of that nature. So, and then additionally to the 41% that were in poverty, 14% were considered vulnerable to poverty, leaving only 45% of the population that is considered not poor. And obviously, just because they're considered not poor, it doesn't necessarily mean they're well off. So the poverty problem is pretty widespread in Belize, and this 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 55%, this 41% of people in Belize that were impoverished was an 8% increase from 2002 to 2009. So much like the crime problem in Belize, the poverty problem is only getting worse, which is unfortunate and which people should pay attention to and hopefully shed some aid to. So if we look at the rural population, which is, as I explained, probably the most clear form of poverty in Belize as opposed to the urban population. If you look at the Toledo district, which is the southern district that I talked about, and which is the poorest district in Belize, mainly because it's almost mainly rural Mayan villages, the same report stated that 46% of the population was living indigent, as opposed to 16%. So that means that almost half of the population in the Toledo district did not have sufficient income to keep a healthy diet, or let alone spend money on any kind of other amenities. So obviously, I cannot say that the crime problem or the poverty problem in Belize is the worst in the world. There are other more well-known countries that are receiving a lot of aid right now, and they definitely deserve to receive aid. But what I tried to do in this report was show that this small country, Belize, that not a lot of people know about, is having major problems, and problems that people should be paying attention to and hopefully figure out a way to help. So you may be asking, what can I do? And I could stand up here forever and say that you should be donating money and all kinds of money, or going on these kind of volunteer trips or anything like that. But at the same time I'm saying that, I know that people could ask questions of, well, how could me as one person make a difference? And it's a fair question. It needs to be a widespread effort. But I'll just leave you with the same idea that I opened with, that if a simple pencil, one simple pencil that we lose, break every day and not think anything of it. If a simple pencil can make the day of a child in Belize that's in poverty and that's surrounded by this crime and these problems that they have, then maybe as one person you can make a difference, because one pencil can make a difference to these kinds of kids. So